The Shawshank Redemption. In 1947, on a cold night in America, a young banker named Andy Dufresne sat in his car and quietly looked at a house in the distance. It was the place where his wife met another man. Andy's marriage was already falling apart because his wife had fallen in love with someone else. That night, Andy drank a lot. He was angry and heartbroken. He had once taken a gun and driven to that house, but later he left. The next day, Andy's wife and the other man were found shot to death. Because Andy had gone there with a gun, the police quickly suspected him. Although Andy insisted that he was innocent, the court found him guilty. In the end, he was sentenced to life in prison and sent to Shawshank Prison. When Andy first arrived at the prison, he saw the high walls, the cold iron gates, and the prisoners with empty expressions. The atmosphere of the prison felt depressing. Many new prisoners were frightened, and some even cried on their first night. Among the prisoners was a man named Red. Red had been in prison for many years. He was smart and calm. Many people in the prison knew him because he could get things that others wanted, such as cigarettes, playing cards, and even small tools. When Red first saw Andy, he felt that this man was different from the others. Andy was quiet and rarely spoke. He did not look like an ordinary criminal. Unlike many others, he did not shout or show signs of despair. One day, Red and his friends made a bet about which new prisoner would break down and cry on the first night. Many thought Andy would cry, but that night Andy did not say a single word. He simply sat quietly and stared into the darkness. A few months later, Andy finally spoke to Red. He asked Red if he could get him a small rock hammer. It was a tool used for carving stones. Red was surprised because such a tool seemed useless in prison. Andy explained that he used to enjoy collecting rocks and wanted something to do during his free time. Later, Red managed to get him the hammer. From that day on, Andy often sat alone, carving stones with the little hammer. He also liked collecting posters, and eventually decorated his cell wall with posters of famous actresses. As time passed, Andy slowly adapted to prison life. But the prison was far from safe. A group of dangerous prisoners often targeted weaker inmates, and they began harassing Andy. He was beaten many times and suffered serious injuries. Sometimes he could barely walk for days afterward. Life in prison was extremely harsh. Many prisoners gradually lost hope. Every day was the same. They ate poor food, slept in tiny cells, and followed the same routine. After years passed, many of them had almost forgotten what life outside was like. But Andy was different. He remained calm and never stopped thinking. He was highly intelligent, especially when it came to finance and taxes. One day, a group of prisoners was assigned to work on a prison rooftop. The weather was hot, and some guards were talking nearby. One guard complained that he would have to pay a large amount of tax. Andy overheard the conversation and suddenly walked over. The guard became furious and almost threw Andy off the roof. But Andy remained calm. He explained that he might be able to help the guard legally reduce his taxes. The guard was doubtful at first, but eventually listened to Andy's advice. The result saved him a significant amount of money. After that, Andy began helping prison guards with financial matters. Many of them came to him for help with taxes and investments. Gradually, even the prison warden noticed Andy's talent. As a reward, Andy managed to get several bottles of cold beer for the prisoners working on the roof. That afternoon, they sat together in the sunshine, drinking beer and enjoying the breeze. For a brief moment, they did not feel like prisoners. They felt like ordinary men. Red later said that it was the closest they had come to feeling free in a very long time. As the years went by, Andy gained a special place within the prison. He started working in the library. The library had very few books, and most of them were old and worn out. Andy believed that prisoners deserved opportunities to learn, so he began writing letters to government offices asking for funding and books. At first, nobody responded, but Andy refused to give up. He wrote letters every week and continued doing so for many years. Finally, one day, the prison received a large shipment of books and records. The library grew larger and better. Many prisoners began reading, and some even started preparing for educational exams. Andy believed that even inside a prison, a person should never stop learning and thinking. There was an elderly prisoner named Brooks. He had spent more than 50 years in prison and worked as the librarian. Eventually, Brooks was granted parole and allowed to leave prison. In theory, freedom should have made him happy, but Brooks was terrified. He had become so used to prison life that he no longer knew how to live outside. He did not understand the world beyond the prison walls anymore. After leaving prison, Brooks lived in a small room and worked in a grocery store. The outside world had changed too much. There were cars everywhere and countless strangers. He felt lonely every day. Eventually, Brooks could not adapt to his new life and chose to end it. His death saddened many prisoners. Red explained that some people had become institutionalized. When they were young, they hated prison, but after spending so much time there, they could no longer live without it. Andy listened quietly when he heard this. One evening, Andy found an opera record in the prison office. He locked the door and played the music through the prison loudspeakers. The beautiful voices echoed throughout every corner of the prison. All the prisoners stopped what they were doing and listened in silence. Most of them could not understand the words, but they were deeply moved by the beauty of the music. For those few minutes, it felt as if everyone had forgotten they were in prison. Eventually, the guards broke into the office and threw Andy into solitary confinement. He spent 2 weeks alone in a dark cell. After he came out, his friends asked if it had been worth it. Andy smiled and said, "Of course it was, because music can never be imprisoned." Red felt that Andy was always different from everyone else. Even in the darkest place, he continued to hold on to hope. Red, however, believed that hope was dangerous. In prison, hope could drive a man insane. Years later, a young prisoner named Tommy arrived at Shawshank. He was cheerful and loved talking. One day, during the conversation, Tommy mentioned a story he had heard in another prison. The story sounded very similar to the case involving Andy's wife. It seemed possible that someone else had actually committed the murders. Andy was overwhelmed with excitement. For the first time, he saw a real chance to regain his freedom. He immediately went to the warden and asked for the case to be reopened. But the warden had no intention of letting Andy leave. Over the years, Andy had helped him hide illegal money and manage fraudulent financial records. If Andy ever walked free, many secrets could be exposed. The warden appeared calm on the surface, but he was a very dangerous man. Soon afterward, the young prisoner who knew the truth was suddenly shot and killed. Officially, it was reported that he had been shot while attempting to escape, but everyone understood that the truth was far more complicated. Andy was devastated. That night, he returned to his cell and sat alone for a very long time. The next day, Andy appeared completely normal. He even chatted with his friends and seemed calm. What nobody knew was that he had been preparing for this moment for many years. In reality, from the day he entered Shawshank, Andy had been using his small rock hammer to slowly chip away at the wall of his cell. Because the wall was old and weak, he had gradually created a tunnel. The tunnel had always been hidden behind his posters. For 19 years, nobody discovered it. Late that night, a violent storm raged outside. Andy finally crawled into the narrow tunnel. He moved through darkness and filth, crawling through a foul-smelling sewage pipe. The pipe stretched for a great distance. Andy endured the smell, the pain, and the fear as he pushed forward. Finally, he broke through the pipe and emerged into the storm. Cold rain poured down onto him. He spread his arms and looked up at the sky. At that moment, he was finally free. The next morning, the guards discovered that Andy was gone. The warden was furious and rushed into Andy's cell. When he pulled away the poster, he finally saw the tunnel behind it. Everyone was shocked. What was even worse was that Andy had taken the warden's hidden money and all the evidence of his crimes. He had carefully prepared a new identity and a new future for himself. Soon afterward, the authorities began investigating the warden's criminal activities. Faced with imminent arrest, the warden eventually chose to take his own life. Meanwhile, Andy had escaped to a small town on the coast of Mexico. The sunlight was bright, the ocean was blue, and everything was completely different from the cold prison he had left behind. Before escaping, Andy had told Red that if he ever got out, he should visit a certain place and look for a large tree. Under that tree, Andy would leave something for him. Many years later, Red was finally granted parole. After leaving prison, he felt just like Brooks. The outside world seemed unfamiliar and frightening. He worked every day and lived alone. Sometimes he feared that he might lose the courage to keep living, just as Brooks had. But in the end, Red decided to follow Andy's instructions. He traveled to the tree and found a letter and some money hidden beneath it. The letter said, "Hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies." When Red read those words, hope returned to his heart. He decided to break the rules of his parole, leave his old life behind, and travel to Mexico in search of Andy. At the end of the story, Red arrives at the seaside. In the distance, under the bright sunshine, a man is repairing a small boat. That man is Andy. The two old friends are finally reunited. They embrace each other tightly. The ocean sparkles beneath the sunlight, and the sky is calm and blue. After decades of suffering, loneliness, and waiting, they have finally found true freedom.